everybody. I am Levi Brickley, your host with the Pursuing Truth podcast, and I got my awesome mother here again. We are going through boundaries again. Well, it's another episode of boundaries anyways. How many episodes have we done now? 8 or 9?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But every 2 weeks for the last 2 months.
3. We've been
3
doing
months?
it since August.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. We've been working hard on boundaries. It's kind of fascinating to me, though. I've been hearing a lot of talk around people that are doing podcasting that everybody's talking about boundaries right now. And I think it's kind of, yeah. And I actually had somebody else tell me that like everybody's talking about boundaries right now. It must be like it fascinates me because when like a topic like this comes up where it's not like a viral topic to talk about boundaries, but it's almost like a show to me of God working in our culture to establish boundaries in our lives, because honestly, establishing the boundaries is what's taking control back of our lives.
That's true. That's true. Or it could just be a trend.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kind of fascinates me, but Mom and I have not done a podcast for now a month. I think it was.
It's been. It'll be 2 weeks Friday.
Oh, okay.
Just 2 weeks.
Okay, so we skipped a week because I had to do an episode.
So it's been 3 weeks Friday because we were supposed to do it last week.
Okay. So the reason why we didn't do one last week was partially because of Thanksgiving. And then
I was sick.
You were sick. We're both still kind of sick, so we may be hacking just a little bit. Hopefully not. I will edit it out if it's not in the midst of a really good conversation.
Okay, that's a good thing. And blowing my nose.
Yeah. So we're both getting over that. And then I had an episode to do with Sam, and we hadn't done one for a month because she was out traveling. I did some traveling. So you guys have got a lot of Real Talk radio show podcasts, which are honestly some of my favorite because they're just raw and authentic conversation, no outline, just seeing where the dialogue takes us. And I always appreciate that. Yeah. So this is the last episode of Boundaries. Hopefully this is not the last time that Mom will be on the podcast, but we'll kind of see how that goes. I kind of hope to bring you back.
Yeah. Well, that'd be nice.
I got plans. You guys are hearing it first on this episode. I am going to be doing a masculinity series. I hope to be able to find a very good, articulate older man that wants to come into the studio with me.
That would be
and
cool.
even mentor me on air. Like, tell me where my faults are. I do not care. I want you guys as listeners to see the raw authenticity in me, and maybe it inspires you to go out into your life and be more authentic with your emotions, thoughts, and ideas, because you have a very unique place in this world. And those unique gifts that you have and the placement where you may be at is a place where somebody can feel loved, where somebody can feel validated in their life. And that's the meaning and the purpose that you add into your relationships in every aspect of your life. So my hope in me being honest and authentic with you guys, that you pull from that and you see that in me and apply it into your own life as well, because there's too much fake stuff in this world.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, make sure that you guys subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify. If you've noticed, I have been uploading the videos to Spotify as well, so you're now able to watch them there, the full uncut, great quality of this camera that we're using. And make sure that you leave a Apple Podcast review on Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, as this increases the analytics of the show. Kind of some numbers that I collected today from Spotify on the analytics of this last year. Yeah. I know this is a really long intro, everybody, but we're going to get into it. But just give us a couple secs, because I want to tell you guys how much I appreciate you tuning into the podcast. We were rated in the top 15% of podcasts for the amount of followers that we have. We recorded over 1,600 minutes of podcast last year, which puts us in the top 5% of content producers in this format. So I think that that's really moving, really awesome. It's awesome to see the growth overall, the podcast in the last 3 months since we essentially started the Boundary series. The following on the podcast across all social media platforms has grown by over 15,000 people. So it's just fantastic to see the message that's being provided on this platform and that it's going out and impacting people in our culture. And we hope to see that continually grow. This is kind of a one-man show. I mean, I do all of the editing, you know.
Everything. I was going to say, you probably live and breathe this outside your job.
I do. This is it's a lifestyle. It's not and I don't wake up and I'm not like, man, I don't want to do that. Like, it's not begrudging. I love this. Yeah. I love this, and
well, you like to talk.
Well, I like to talk, but I think too. I don't know why I like it so much. I don't know if it's because I like talking, or I like that chase of like editing the videos and producing it, seeing how people are moved by some of the conversations that I have with multiple people. So and it's cool to see the community, you know, people talking amongst themselves. You know, I think about the panel the other night. Yeah. I'm just like, you know, that's so cool, because a year and a half ago that would have never happened. And now there's two of us that have never met before in our lives and then are connected to another one. And it's just cool to see that kind of develop around what the platform has been able to do. And that's because of the growth. That's because of you listeners going out on your Snapchats and sharing it to your social media stories and stuff like that. Just awesome to see it grow. So I wanted to share those things with you guys. Let's go ahead and get into boundaries. You ready? Okay. I know that was a very long introduction, and I'm not going to apologize about it, because the listeners that have been here since the beginning, you deserve to know that you are part of that growth and the message that's moving to other people. So last episode, if you missed the episode, we talked about the first 5 laws of boundaries. And those were sowing and reaping, law of responsibility, law of power, law of respect, and law of motivation. We got a following 5 to cover tonight, and we're just going to kind of see where that takes us. I'm excited about it. If you have not listened to that episode, we may refer back to some of the things we talked about on that episode, so it would be good for you to maybe go check that out, even afterwards, and you can kind of see why we were kind of linking them up a little bit. So today, the very first law that we have to talk about is evaluation, the law of evaluation.
And you know what I think's odd about that? Since you said you wanted me to introduce this, when you were talking about getting a man in here to kind of mentor you and open you up and stuff like that, I said that's right there is what evaluation's about, is that your ability to be vulnerable, to really dig into yourself and look at yourself and look at your shortcomings, look at things that you need to improve on in your life. And that's basically what the law of evaluation's about, is that even though looking at those things may be hurtful to you, nobody wants to admit that we have shortcomings. Nobody wants to admit that I'm on the defensive, or I'm OCD, or I'm, you know, the things that, or I'm fearful, or I've got anxiety, or all those things that are looked at upon as a negative thing.
Why don't people want to do that, though?
Because it puts us in a negative light. You know, we live in a culture that we have to put this persona that our lives are perfect, we love ourselves, and we're great.
Yeah, it's just the idea of narcissism and self-indulgence.
Right.
In the moment that you have to dig into yourself, you have to examine your inadequacies.
Right. It's even like being truthful with yourself if you're really are a racist. Mm-hmm. Or if you are judgmental, or if you gossip, or if you have to be honest with yourself.
Well, and people like to point fingers at other people that are judging, but they refuse to look at themselves and look into their own biases. And maybe it's not even about race, but maybe it's about your perspective of men. Maybe it's your perspective of the family dynamic, or Christianity in a general term. Right. You know, what's your view of a Christian? What's your view of a man? All of those things and how you apply yourself in relationship is, again, there it is, a direct reflection of your illicit biases in those relationships towards that person.
Right. But, and so when we talk about evaluation, we're looking at the things that we have to evaluate that hurt us, but let's talk about what harms us. If you don't evaluate those shortcomings within you, in the long term, it's going to harm you. And so would you rather set up that knowledge of that and setting your boundaries and learning where your property line is so that down the road, you're not harming yourself for further injury, per se? So like even setting up with a boundary, even as a parent with kids, we set up boundaries for you kids so that you learn where your property line is, where you should not go beyond because it's going to harm you. It's going to hurt you for the long haul. We teach our kids, don't do drugs. Why do we say don't do drugs?
Because we know the lifestyle that will result from that.
Very possibility. Are there people out there that actually do drugs and yet they're still productive and they're still working and they're still functioning? Sure there is. The problem is that you don't know. Like my fear of you kids drinking, knowing that your father is alcoholic, knowing that alcoholism runs in your father's side of the family. My fear of when you would drink, oh my gosh, are you going to become an alcoholic?
Right.
So that knowing yourself and evaluating yourself, am I drinking to the point that it is becoming a problem and I have to recognize that and curtail it and get help for it or whatever? Or are you going to continue on thinking that it's not really, and then 5 years down the road, you're harming yourself because you are into it?
You know, I think about that and how much I've slowed down on drinking. And why have I slowed down so much on drinking? And this is the reason why I've slowed down so much on drinking. I can't be drunk behind the microphone. I can't be drunk behind the camera. I got to come in here.
You can't be a drunk being a police officer.
Yeah, and I got to be as articulate as possible. I have to be mentally capable for every conversation that we're going to have.
Right.
And come into it and be the most articulate that I possibly can be.
But you have to admit yourself, we're going to be vulnerable here, Levi. But you have to admit to yourself that there was a time when it was a concern.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember after my first relationship when I was 21 and we broke up, I remember going through a handle a week of Jack Daniels. Yeah. Nobody knew that. I was here at home by myself, and I was putting down whiskey
we didn't
like
know
it was
the
water.
amount or what you were drinking, but we knew you were doing too much of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's so, yeah, I mean, I own that completely.
And, well, you were defensive at first when we would say things to you.
Yeah.
You would get a little defensive, you know, but I think you finally came to the realization that you had to do an evaluation and go, yeah, it's getting a little out of control.
Right. But if you're getting that feedback from people in your circle, yeah, you're naturally going to want to be like, whoa, stop talking about me like that. That's not really me. You're going to get defensive because you don't like being challenged. It's natural in your pride. That it's my pride. It's my life. I own my life. Who are you to talk about my life? And the problem is when people look at everything that way, and I mean, I still do that too. All of us are guilty of this.
Yes, we all are.
But instead of accepting what they're saying and why they're saying it and understanding it and starting to find some meaning in the sense behind it, we look at them and we're like, it's all you. It's just your perspective. I don't care what you think. And so you never change. And you have to take some of those little nuggets. I don't want to say it's a nugget in a relationship that somebody is feeding into you and saying, hey, these are some inadequacies that I see in you. And I'm really concerned about where it may potentially lead. Right. I want you to know that I'm here to talk to you about anything. If you're struggling with something or you need to find something to do to get you off of it, I want you to know that I'm here for you.
And I think that's, you know, again, we just expose everything in our family. We do have an issue in our family to be confrontational. I think sometimes we fail in doing it in a more caring, hey, I'm here to help you, I'm not trying to condemn you kind of way.
Yeah, sometimes it's very harsh and but on the flip side, I think the benefit to the harshness is not necessarily the lack of compassion or empathy, like many people in culture would examine it as a lack of empathy and compassion. But it's that hard love that's needed. It's that, hey, wake up. You can't be acting like that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they miss the point in that. And so they live this deceitful life. They deceive themselves because they're not evaluating the things within themselves to understand, why are these things happening within my relationships? Why am I making poor decisions, and not establishing themselves in a way that's going to breed the best in the future for them?
Or even in a selfish way of looking at, why do people treat me the way they do? And we're wanting to project the blame on other people for how I'm feeling about myself, when we really should be reflecting that inward and saying, why am I feeling this way? Why is what they say to me offend me so badly? In evaluation, I want to go back to what the Bible says about that the narrow gate is hard to walk through, because doing the right thing is always hard. Self-evaluation, making change, doing something that you need discipline on, or going to someone and saying, hey, I want you to be completely honest with me and tell me, what is it about me that creates these kind of situations in my life? So going through that narrow part is going to be hard. And it talks about the destruction of going through a broad gate. When you don't make those changes, and when you don't evaluate yourself and stuff, and you just keep pushing through the broad gate and having the feel good feelings, because, we don't want our feelings hurt, so we just do things that are going to make us feel good. Your life doesn't produce much.
Yeah, exactly. The key to success is discipline.
Yes.
You don't become successful. Some people, very rare, become successful overnight, or it's handed to them.
Right.
Like me on the podcast, I have to constantly be doing something with it in order to make it happen. Those successful numbers don't come from just, a couple times here and there and kind of being spotty. It's consistency in your life and waking up with discipline.
Slow down. We're going to come to that law here in a little bit. Anyway, so back to the law of evaluation. I love this statement. Saying no is to live a purposeful life.
Do you think, and this is a good conversation, and I want to hear your perspective on it. Saying no is a disagreeable personality trait, correct?
Yeah. Saying no is a negative to most people.
Yeah, but it's also a personality trait. Do you think that women oftentimes have a harder time saying no than men?
Yes.
Why?
Because women have an innate want to please, and men don't care.
And men don't care.
Most men, if they're assured of themselves, they feel confident and stuff like that, they don't have a problem with boundaries near as much as women have problems with boundaries. There are some men, I'm not saying that across the board, but if you find a healthy man, that man doesn't have an issue with saying no.
Right. Well, it's also because he is evaluating himself.
Right.
He evaluates where he wants to go in life and where he wants to lead his family. So he knows that when certain things come up, it's very easy for him to be more decisive.
Right.
It's like being at the store, right? A man generally can walk into the store. He knows exactly what he's looking for and exactly what he wants to get out of the store, right?
Right.
Whereas a woman, she sees all of these other different things, all the
distracted.
shiny things. And the next thing you know, you're in the store for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, but take a man into a gun shop. Come on. Take a man into the Carrabba's, or what is that?
Yeah, but
place?
what I'm saying though is a decisive man that knows exactly what he wants when he walks into the store. He's going to be like, "Hey, I want a Glock 19. Do you have any available?" No. He's not going to go buy a SIG 328. He wanted a Glock 19. So he's going to leave the store and go somewhere else.
Because you do have a man can have a better mindset when he has his mindset on getting something. Women are fickle. We can't make up our minds.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. And I do think that women have a harder time setting boundaries because it's innate to us to want to be pleasing, to give that servant heart, to nurture. And sometimes it's hard to say no. I see young moms with young kids, and they don't want to hurt their children's feelings. It's not that they're hurting their children's feelings. They don't want their feelings to be hurt if that child rejects them.
But see, and I also find this fascinating because you go back to when Adam and Eve, when Eve was created from Adam's rib, that she was made by God to be a partner to the man.
Right.
And the result of their sin was that she would experience childbearing and the pain that results from that. but the man would have to be responsible for his
Work
family.
and toil and yes.
Yeah, work and toil the land is
Yes.
exactly what it says. And so there's that aspect of leadership per se, the responsibility that you're responsible for saying no. A good man can say no without a problem,
Right.
especially when it's to honor God and not to honor his ego. And there's a huge difference
Yes.
and a divide there. There's oftentimes that, and this is the problem with men owning that responsibility, and also the conversation of people talking about hierarchy and the male patriarchy, which is the man rules the world or whatever, is that when a man takes advantage of that responsibility that he has, he's fulfilled all of his ego. He's living for himself.
Yes.
He doesn't live for the community. He doesn't live for the family.
Well, you
and
can
so
say
there's that.
You can say that about a man that's a workaholic.
Yeah.
That doesn't have boundaries with his boss to say, hey, I got a family to go home to. I mean, he's feeding his own ego there.
Right. Because look at how much success I can obtain all the time.
Yeah.
And this is the conversation like inside my head when I hear about, I'm just going to throw it out there, Tom Brady and the Giselle situation, and Tom Brady going back to play football and not being there for his family. I have no clue what's their relationship dynamic is, but the dude's already got 6 rings. Why does he have to go back? Is it to boost the ego of getting 7 rings, 8, 9, 10? Regardless, you have millions of dollars. Here's a game that you love, yes, but man,
Redirect it.
What's more important?
Why can't he direct his love for the game in coaching or doing little league and stuff, investing in the next generation of football players? Still has his hand in it, but yet can be available to his family.
And so, like, that's the essence of this evaluation topic,
Yes.
is evaluating what is most important to you. What do you want to get out of your life? If that's what you want to get is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rings and walk around and you're not even able to lift up your arms because these Super Bowl rings are so damn heavy, then go for it. But understand there's consequences to not making the right decisions within your life. And I'm not saying which one is right or wrong, but I think that those are things to evaluate.
Right. They are.
And so everybody can apply that in their own lives. Where are you at right now? Where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself in the future? And how are you going to get there is by evaluating where you're currently at today, evaluating your past, and establishing the boundaries that in the future, I'm not going to lead myself down this road again. I'm going to move beyond this by saying no, and we're going to develop healthy habits from there.
Yeah. And just remember, confrontation and truth creates growth.
Yeah.
You can't grow without having some confrontation and a lot of truth in there.
Yeah.
You're not going to grow.
Yeah. You it's like you think Muhammad Ali did great boxing before he ever got in a ring? No, he had to box a few people. He had to get in a few fights.
I'm sure he had his nose broke a few times first.
He had to show up and know where he needed to get better at. Yeah. That's the essence of being an athlete. It's constantly evaluating where you need to get better at. It's why everybody watches film after a football game and so on.
Yeah. But, I can remember the first time, and I'll close with this little tidbit here. The first time that I really remember taking an evaluation of myself, of where I was at in my life, was when Daisha and Bill got married. And I still had that idea that she was still under my control. And I called on her a few times and she put a boundary up, saying, I have a home and I have a husband and I can't be there at your beck and call anymore. And we had that falling out and we didn't talk for 6 months. And I had to really evaluate myself and why I felt the way I did and acted the way I did and stuff, and realize, do I want a good relationship with my daughter and son-in-law? Or do I want to continue this strife and not have that? Mm-hmm. And I had to humble myself and apologize and say, I was wrong and I won't do it again. You tell me where your boundaries are and I'm going to respect them.
And that's the benefit, is you not becoming bitter and resentful.
Right. And we have a great relationship.
And you may not have been involved in your niece's or my niece's life.
Right.
Your granddaughter that's now 22 at TCU, you may not have been involved in her life as much as you've had the opportunity to.
And so I think about so many families, people in my own circle that have strife within their family. Somebody has to step up and go, okay,
yeah,
what are we doing that's creating that strife in our family?
And that's
where
the
does our
reason.
responsibility lie? Let's evaluate each person involved in that has to evaluate. Were you being reactive because you were being self-serving? Or were you reacting because you were hurt and express your hurt? You know, I mean, learning to be able to communicate that. And it's hard. It's hard. You know, so anyway.
The essence of forgiveness can prevent bitterness and resentment,
Right.
so that you live a more happy and fulfilling life.
Right. So.
All right.
Number 7.
Number 7. I was about to say number 2, but it's 2 today, 7 in total.
Yes.
Law of proactivity.
I love this one.
Why?
Because I'd love to be proactive.
Yeah, you do. We were putting up lights last Friday,
Yes.
you know, and I have to mess with Mom because in the past, Mom's a perfectionist. So, you know, she tells us what she wants done. Excuse me. And if we don't get it done the way that she would like it to be done, she's like, take it all down and restart.
I didn't make you do that.
You didn't, which I was very happy. You know, maybe in your old age, you get more docile as time goes on, where you're not so uptight about things.
I think that started a long time ago. But, you know, this year, for some reason, it's like, man, I'm going to be grateful if just somebody puts them up for me.
Yeah.
I just was grateful that somebody put them up for me.
Are they on? Are they working now? Are they on?
No.
They're not? Oh. Call Brock.
I did. He came over, got them fixed, and then somebody messed with them.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine who messed with them.
And they didn't work, and I didn't want to tell Brock again, and I did, and he said he'll try to get over. And I drive in the driveway and go, my lights aren't working. It's okay. It's okay.
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. What does that mean?
Well, Newton's law.
Yeah, Newton's third law.
Third law?
Yeah, it's the third law.
Okay. Well, for everything that we do, something's going to come back, whether good or bad.
Mm-hmm. Consequences.
Consequences, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
what are some consequences that you've seen in being a single mother, and some of the things that you failed at? You want to put me on the spot? I'm going to put you on the spot. No, I'm kidding. What are some things that you think were?
Let's go from very early on. We've talked about this. I had a lot of anger issues. My basic instinct, emotion in reacting to anything was anger. And what the reaction of that anger was, it made you children somewhat withdraw from me. Not you guys so much, but the younger ones. My anger probably is what created a lot of anxiety in their adult life. My OCD and my demands of perfection. Those kind of things, I think I see in the forward kids, you know, some of the things that they deal with, like their anxiety or their passiveness or their feelings of maybe some inadequacy there. So those were the reactions, you know. And sadly, you know, I when I look back, that's what breaks my heart, is that I'm glad I didn't die of a heart attack during one of my anger fits, because that would be the memory my kids would live with the rest of their lives, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I kind of grew out of that. I'm not saying it was ever resolved until, actually it wasn't resolved until after Caleb passed away. That I had a reconciliation about my control issues then. Losing Caleb.
What made you want to be so controlling?
I think it's because my childhood was so out of control. And so in order for me to feel secure, I felt like if I can control everything around me and in my environment, that gave me a secure feeling. And it was a false security. you know, because I didn't really have any control over any other person. I only had control over myself. But I feel like that maybe that's where it came from, was my childhood was so out of control. There was no control for me in my childhood. Never got to make choices, and I never got to, you know.
So you just gripped onto the control to hold on to it, to prevent having to experience maybe some of the inadequacy that you felt as a child.
Right.
This is the consequence.
Well, and learning, my anger came from two emotions that I didn't recognize for many years, and it was hurt and fear. And when I stop and think about that, my whole childhood was fearful. My dad was very abusive, very volatile home. My mom was very passive, but bitter and angry. I mean, she was bitter and resentful, not angry, resentful. She didn't show a lot of anger, but the bitterness and resentful was there. There was no communication. You know, things were just out of control. I never felt like there was anything stable for me. So that was fear for me going into my adult life. And I'm thinking, if I can control everything, my life will be okay. And then the hurt, because I had suffered hurt after hurt after hurt, and nobody ever recognized it, and I didn't know how to express it. And so those are the two emotions I carried most of my younger adult life.
And you said now, being at the age you're at now, is like you're able to kind of reconcile some of that control that you had.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, I still have my little bit of COD things, you know, like the lights. I want them up. I don't want them laying down. Dumb little things around the house, you know, like when I set a knick-knack at a certain place, I want it to stay there. If somebody moves it, I go back and move it back where I wanted it, you know, but I'm not in the controlling state of doing that. I do that for myself internally, you know, because it just kind of bothers me if it's a little wonky, so I go straighten it. But I don't nag anyone to do it my way.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think this is the gift of time.
Yes. Gift of
time. Time is a gift, because as you get older, you're able to look back and evaluate as the last law, see where your inadequacies were. And you're able to resolve some of the issues that were created in you not being proactive in the way that you needed to be in your life.
Right.
So now you get to be proactive. Now you get to take control.
But, you know, like one of the examples is, you know, we're going to take the example of the old postal worker who everybody says, man, he was such a nice guy and he was just so laid back and stuff. And then all of a sudden he goes postal and goes in and shoots the place up. Why? What did that happen? How'd that happen? And even in a woman with full of anger like I was, you hold it so long, something's going to happen. Something's going to explode. And you hope that what happens in a good nature way, that it turns things around and not goes the destructive way. Okay?
You want to be the best parent possible? Learn what your monster is inside of you.
Yes. You know, and by the grace of God, really, in all honesty, by the grace of God. Because I can tell you, even the first few years that your dad and I were together, it was rough. And I didn't have a problem swinging if I needed to.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew something in me, like even when disciplining you kids, especially the older ones, I knew there were times when I could not spank or correct discipline because I would hurt you. I would hurt one of them.
That's knowing the monster.
Yes. And I was able to, for the most part, withhold that kind of danger. But like I said, really it was losing Caleb. God had just been really working with me for some time before Caleb passed away, and I'm grateful that time that God gave me those years prior to Caleb passing away, that I really dove into him, and he fed me back, you know, and I started releasing a lot of those things. And when Caleb passed away, it was really a reckoning for me that there is no control. If you think you got control of your life, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
You need to evaluate it, because there is no control. And
it's like the perspective of you playing the skit and you're the main character. And when you view your life that way, you think that everything's evolving around you in this image. But there's so many moving parts to our lives that we absolutely have no control of. I have no control over you leaving the house and going through an intersection and somebody running a stop sign and hitting your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I have no control of that. And it's not like knock on the table. Oh my gosh. I need to like make sure that I didn't just, speak this into existence. Come on now. I have no control over that other person.
No.
No control.
No.
And that's an aspect of us thinking that, oh, we can like shape our life the way that we want by speaking things into existence. We can't do that.
No.
There's natural things that happen to us where we are victims. And
Right.
the point of proactivity
Right.
is that you see what this issue is and why.
Right.
And you do something about it. You act upon it,
Yes.
right? Instead, like I have a story for you. In January, I had a good friend of mine fly out here from California, and it was the first time meeting her. And when she came, we went to Wichita and went to a brewery. And on the way home, the Jeep got a flat tire. I have a decision to make. I could be mad and angry about the tire going flat while we're driving back from Wichita.
Yeah.
Or I could just choose to be like, you know what? Life happens.
Yeah.
It sucks. So next thing you know, I'm pulling to a parking lot and I change the tire. Afterwards, you know how good that felt to be able to look back and be like, wow, I didn't get angry
Yeah.
about that.
And what a nice example you set to your friend that you weren't stupid and just went ballistic over a flat tire.
Yeah.
Like
it's 15 more minutes of my time.
Yeah.
It may be the 15, 20 minutes that I would be sitting on my couch playing on my phone.
So, and so in talking about this law, the action and reaction, everybody needs that reaction. Everybody needs that initial get it off your chest kind of thing, anger. So let's take a victim mentality thing. Something horrendous, some kind of abuse or something has happened to you. You have the right to have that reaction and be angry and be enraged and really upset and stuff. But at some point, you've got to re-engage into life
Mm-hmm.
and take that situation, and you've got a choice. You can either allow yourself to mold into that reaction and stay there. That's where we get the victim mentality. You stay there, or you choose to say, it's a situation that happened to me. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. I had no control over it, but I'm not going to let it stop me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to grow out of this. I'm going to use this to help other people. I'm going to use this to grow from.
Right.
Okay. Then you move out of that. Everybody has the right for that reaction because it's a natural emotional thing to be reactive when something happens that hurts us or derails us or whatever. But there is a point in time that you have to re-engage into life. A lot of people struggle with that and re-engaging and getting out of that victim mentality. I see in the work that I do, I see people come in and I get the whole story of blah, 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 blah. And, this is something that I even took away from losing Caleb. I had people in my life, because I did go to some support groups. I went to parents, that have lost a child and stuff. But what I seen was there was this group of people over here that lost their child and they never came out of that grief. Mm-hmm. And the child had been gone years, and they have never came out of the grief and never been able to re-engage into life.
Mind you, getting out of the grief isn't getting over the death.
No.
It's acceptance.
No, that's right. But I knew that. Something internally told me I do not want to be... My whole thing was my identity was not going to lie. I don't introduce myself by saying, hey, I'm Kim. Yeah, I'm a single mom and I lost a son. Mm-hmm. You'll not hear neither one of those things out of my mouth until after we engage for a while and something in that conversation prompts me to say, yeah, I've lost a child.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that start the conversation with, oh, my day was just so horrible and terrible and blah, 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 blah.
Or they will comment on the first thing that, I was sexually abused or I was, beaten or I was, I never wanted that to be part of who I was. It is a situation that happened in my life, but it wasn't who I was.
Yeah.
I wanted to see people to see Kim, not see Kim, the mom that lost a child, not to see Kim who was a single mom, not to see Kim who was abused as a child. I wanted them to see who I was in Christ. And so that was never my identity, But I do believe that God, those things happen in our life. And I do believe that God works all things for good. And what we're supposed to do with those things is to take them and help somebody get through the next stage.
Absolutely. As you're talking about this, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is dad. In my perspective of being raised in the fatherless home and you being a single parent, is that I have all these inadequacies of what I think that a man is. And it's not that I didn't have good older brothers that kind of gave me some direction at times that I needed, but I didn't have a father. And so my question for me in the future is, well, what type of father am I going to be? Am I going to be the same type of father that I had, playing the victim? All of my inadequacies, all of these terrible things about me are because of the decisions that my dad had and not playing a role in my life. Or am I going to take that and be like, Dad did this, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Dad did this, I will not do that.
Okay.
But
how do you achieve that? How do you, without that feeling of having that influence in your life, how are you going to achieve those things you don't want to do that your dad did?
I think, one, I don't hold resentment against my dad for any of the decisions that he made. I'm not angry about it. I own it. And when I talk about him, I'm not talking about him from a standpoint to diminish my dad's character. I'm talking about him just like what you said. How many other boys, how many other women are in their adult life that didn't have a father? And so what perspective can I play into that to provide them, to possibly move them beyond that hurt that they experience and get over the bitterness and resentfulness of how they chose to examine that situation?
Right.
And so the number one thing I had to accept was who my dad was. I have to accept who he was and understand I'm a completely different person and that my life is full of opportunity.
Yes.
And I could either choose to let all of these things hold me back, or I can capture the opportunity by constantly looking beyond to where I want to be and how I'm going to get there. And so through my acceptance, through my motivation, was then I have to be the man that I never had. Accept that. Because once I accepted that, now it's like, well, what's the next step?
Right.
What's the next step? And I'm moving forward. I'm not holding on to all of the crap about dad. I own it. And I take responsibility in my life of how that plays out.
Right. And I think women have the same, when I think about the women that I know that have been in very abusive relationships and, domestic violence calls, and somebody goes to jail, but they keep going back together, I understand that fear that the woman has, especially if it's been a very controlling one and you have no means of supporting yourself and you have no means of getting out and getting a place of your own. It takes humility to say, I need help. And that means sometimes swallowing your pride and going into a shelter. Swallowing your pride and letting somebody else take control of your life until you can get control of your life. And I say control in a way of constructive control. A lot of women, the fear of having to humble themselves and go somewhere they don't want to go is difficult. But if you want to grow past this and not keep repeating it, and you want to get your kids out of that, you got to humble yourself and go, I have no control of my life right now, so somebody else that can help me get there, I need to let step in.
A perfect example of this is the movie Walk the Line. You remember when Johnny Cash was strung out on drugs and everything, and his family wanted to help him, so they bought a cabin out in the woods, and they basically placed him out there to get off the drugs. And I just remember the image of him laying in the bed on the mattress without the sheet, and he's sitting there playing with one of the buttons on the on the
coming
mattress,
down.
and he's sweating profusely. He's extremely sick. And I think the perspective to draw from that is go to the darkest place. Go there.
You know, find that support person that's, you know, which he did have the support there
Right.
of June and her family. They were there to support him, but they let him go through it. But he
Yeah.
humbled himself to allow that. And
Right.
you know, so I feel like, you know, and any person who you feel, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you're in a not just violent but manipulative, not in a good place, that proactivity is what's going to get you out of that.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't set that boundary and go, I need help, I need to get from here to there and take the help. There's help out there.
Right.
I have a hard time having empathy for people who are not willing to make a change.
I have a really hard time having empathy for people that play victim.
Too.
It's extremely hard. I don't respect it. I respect your value.
Mm-hmm.
I respect who you are, but what happened to you isn't who you are.
Right.
What I respect is when somebody is strong enough to move them forward beyond that.
Right. Well, even for example, today I got a call. And this lady proceeded to tell me that she was on disability, that she was living in her car because her daughter broke the lease on her house. And so she had to move out of the house. She lost all her stuff. She lived in the car. She was heating the car by a little propane heater. She was eating by this. And she, you know, needed help. Okay, what kind of help do you need? Well, I need money to get me a motel until I can get here to there. I need food. I need this. I mean, she just had a list of things. So I started with the things that I know of that are in the community. Have you called the homeless hotline? Yeah, I called them, blah, 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 but they didn't, blah, 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 but they didn't. So that was discounted. So I said, have you checked into a women's shelter? Oh, I can't go to a shelter. I have too much anxiety and PTSD. I can't deal with being around people. Blah, 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 blah. And so I give her the next thing, and blah, 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 blah. At that point,
Excuse after excuse
Yes.
after excuse.
And at that point, it didn't matter what I would have given her. It would have helped her for a day, but it would not have resolved the problem.
Right.
And so, you know, sadly, I said, you know, I gave you some choices. Here's some phone numbers, but you're the one that has to do the work.
Right.
I'm just giving you the information. But you know, every contact that I'd given her, she'd already gone through that.
Mm-hmm.
And that told me, you're not wanting to change and better yourself and get better. You're just wanting somebody to get you from one day to the next.
Right.
You know?
She needs to be proactive and make the right decisions. Goes back to law number 2 of responsibility. Yeah. Taking responsibility. Yep. Guys, I am struggling over here. The more that I talk, the drier my throat gets, the more I want to cough. And we gotta finish this. We're going to power through.
We are going to power through.
Yeah. So if you kind of like, seems like we're jumping around, which I don't think we're jumping around too much, no. But I'm going to get all those coughs and stuff as much as I can, edit it out. But it truly, we're over here in a war. Okay. So law number 8, the law of envy.
Envy.
Yeah.
That, you know, you stop and think about that word, envy, that green-eyed monster.
Mm-hmm.
You know, envy is the most basic, what I want to say, the most basic sin from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. I want to be like them.
You want to be like them? No, yeah. Satan wanted to be like God.
Mm-hmm.
He envied God, and look where it got him. Mm-hmm. You know,
look where it got us,
and look where it got us. Same ways with us. We envied that apple. Eve wanted that apple. So envy is a very dangerous place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it really shows if you have an issue with envy, you need to really look at yourself because something's not right within yourself. You know,
you don't feel adequate.
You don't feel adequate, or you feel incomplete, or you feel like you have been looked over, or, you know, I work hard. I should have all the things that person has. How come they get the big old house and I live in a little 2-bedroom house? Or why is it they drive a new car and I can't have a new car? Well, we don't really know what's going on in their house, to be honest with you.
Right.
But it's like, if you're doing the work, find contentment with where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Accept your position in the world.
Yeah.
Don't be so accepting to the position that you say, I'm not going to move.
We think of envy in personal possessions, wanting to keep up with the Joneses with the big house and the cars and stuff. But what about the envy of somebody else's personality or character? I think that to me goes deeper. That shows a real inadequacy of being able to be really doing an examination of your own gifts that God's given you.
Yeah.
And developing the person he created in you. And so I think that goes deeper. It's a very spiritual thing when you're envying another person for who they are.
Well, and I see this too when I hear it all the time. Like people complain about, the 1%, like talking about money. Everybody's talking about, it's the 1%'s fault. It's the 1%'s fault. But here everybody is being just as greedy, trying to obtain just as much money as that person. And who's to say that your character and your integrity, all of your makeup, that you would be that person that's giving out the millions of dollars? Have you had $1 million given to you? Did you go out and give it out? Because the overwhelming majority of people that have that much money don't do that.
No.
It doesn't matter what your belief is and what your intentions are. It's your action. And so many people say, it's all them. Why are we focused on them? Why don't we focus on right now what we can control? Okay. We as a people, right? As the United States, we can vote people into office.
Right.
That prevents some type of
injustice
within our culture. That's the ownership that you have.
Well,
but if you want to play
ownership and going, really, let's look at, if we want to take a politics stance of this, how many people engage in their community government? Do you volunteer? Do you go to the city meetings to see what's going on? Do you involve yourself in your community to know politics going on?
But the problem is the majority of people have given up hope. They think that they have no control anymore. They think that the system is rigged. A lot of people have even come to this acceptance of we live in a matrix.
Is that not a place of complacency?
I absolutely do think that it's a place of complacency. But we do this in our own lives too, right? Yeah. Everything around me is everybody else's fault. And I'm not like, I'm going to show up to this today. Look, we're sitting here hacking, coughing, getting through this podcast. But regardless, we're going to get it done, yo.
Yeah. Well, and that's the way I feel about, and I have to say, I'm guilty. I don't get involved with those kind of things. But when your kids were in school, I was involved in being a homeroom mom. I was involved with going to teacher-parent conferences. I mean, my daughter is a substitute teacher in a school district, and it behooves her that out of her 35 students that she has, maybe 5 parents show up for teacher-parent conferences. Maybe 5 parents out of 35 kids. That's appalling to me. It shows me that parents aren't actively involved in their children's life. Now, not to say that maybe another 5 parents can't physically go to the meetings, but they're having conferences, calls, or talking to the teachers. But you got to realize that the majority of parents have no involvement whatsoever in their kids' life in school.
And this is the essence of liberal politics, is that it gives responsibility and authority to the system. It doesn't allow within the home to take responsibility and authority within the home. And so now these parents are relying on the system, and they don't even care what the result of the system is anymore because they've given up so much responsibility in their own life. And that's exactly what the problem is. Like, I'm not trying to get overly political there, but like this is the essence of, per se, maybe either my libertarian conservative type message of take ownership, take responsibility in your life. And like, I don't play two ways on that. When I hear a politician talking about, well, we need to do this in the schools, we need more of this, we need more of that, the more that the government needs to be involved in my life and somebody's telling me that, the more I don't want to listen to you, and I absolutely do not want you to be involved in my life at all, because that person is trying to strip away the responsibility of the individual. And you want to get past this law of envy, and you want to be proactive in your life, and you want to evaluate things, and you want some motivation, and you want some respect, some power and responsibility, and knowing what you're sowing and reaping by your decisions that you make. You have to understand that you are responsible for that.
Yeah. I mean, how many organizations out there are desperate for volunteers?
Yeah.
I mean, you really want a better, more productive life, a more life of some peace and feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Give of yourself. Give of your time. If you don't have time, give of your money. If you don't have money, then give of your time. It just is a back and forth thing.
Yeah.
I never really had much money.
Mm-hmm.
But weren't we active in doing things?
Oh, yeah. We were always doing things.
You know, I can remember when we moved over to 4th Street when we moved in. You were 10 years old, and there was an older lady living across the street. And what's one of the first things you did that spring? You went over a motor yard. She didn't ask. You went over and did it. It needed to be done.
Yeah.
You know, and I've always been very proud of you kids in that sense. That you did take on a good sense of involvement and knowing when you need to be there for somebody else. Kind of thing, you know, and I've always been proud of that with you kids.
Yeah,
you see a need, you try to help take care of that.
Talking about envy is knowing that the result of me being envious is me being bitter and resentful.
Mm-hmm. It is, and you know, if you go and volunteer at some of those places, maybe you'll realize that where you're at is a whole lot better than where some of these other people are at.
That's and the other thing is you're taking some responsibility within the community to change some of the aspects that you don't like, instead of complaining about it and being a victim to it.
Right.
You're acting upon it and making sure that the community operates in the best way possible by being involved.
Yeah. And that's where you go back to, you know, no, can we make major changes in big government? From where we're at, no. We can make changes in our community government. Well,
it's this instant gratification all the time. Like these results of policies or laws that are implemented take years to see the numbers and see what happens. But we're constantly thinking like this all the time. You know, that's what we want. Mm-hmm. We never see what the long-term outcome is.
Right.
We just say, oh, we operate in what sounds nice. We don't operate in logic.
And see, there we're going back to the narrow gate as opposed to the broad gate.
Yeah.
That instant gratification gets you through that broad gate quickly.
Yeah.
But if you want long-term change, you're going to have to go through that narrow passageway.
You know, I was even thinking about this as because I made a post this week that had like 7,000 likes and over 100,000 people saw it. And it was about texting. And everybody knows I'm not a good texter. Am I texting right now? No, I'm not texting right now because I got responsibilities and things I got to take care of. And so I set my phone aside because I want to be intentional in the conversation on the podcast. Mm-hmm. I want to be intentional when I'm taking a call at work. I want to be intentional when I'm around the family members at Thanksgiving so that I thoroughly enjoy that time and I'm present with them. And so I made the post about how texting is for updates. I texted everybody that I'm talking to today that, hey, I'm doing a podcast with my mom. I'm not going to be around my phone. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's the update. So you know I'm not going to be replying to you. But I'm also the type of person you want to call me, call me. But the problem is that so many people, when they are in the dating realm, they think if he doesn't do this, if he doesn't do that, if there isn't this level of consistency within a dating relationship, I'm not going to even give him a chance.
Yeah.
And what a sad part of our culture and society to always be searching for that instant gratification.
Right.
Why? Because you can go to McDonald's and order your McChicken and McNuggets and get it like that. Like how simple and easy it is for us. We never see what the potential is And
what I
us being
noticed as
patient.
an old person back in the day when our phones were hooked to the walls, you make a call. I mean, I can remember not having even a voicemail. I mean, you didn't have an answering machine or a voicemail. You called, they didn't call back. You'd have to call back later. We had a lot less anxiety in our society because we weren't always on cue to look for that message, that call, that text, that this, that. The anxiety that I see people have because they're constantly having to see if they got a response or if they got something on Facebook or if it's like, can you just not disconnect and chill and put that thing away?
Right.
And look, here I am. I'm talking to you. You don't need to be talking to that thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and that's the other thing. It's like taking the appreciation for the moment, like being present with it. Because if you're present in that situation, at least, when you lose somebody, you don't got to look back and be like, dang, I wish I really gave them the attention. Instead, I was so focused on my phone and all these other people that wanted my attention and this and that and blah, 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 blah. Give the attention to the people that are right in front of you and grow those relationships so that you don't become bitter and resentful. Because here's the other outcome to you being present. And you listening to people, truly listening, asking questions and understanding people, is you are no longer envious of this other person that's done so great in their life, but you've evaluated everything in your own life to know where you're inadequate, and through listening and asking questions, those people within all of your relationships, you see the meaning and the purpose that they have in your life, and you're like, I'm inadequate here, but I can bring this person along with me to develop something great, so that I can be that person one day. Right. You're not operating in bitterness and resentfulness. You're not getting distracted. You're aware in the situation that you're currently in right now, and you're aware of your past, so that when you want to get to where you want to go, you've developed all of this. Like in the midst of conversation, like I always want to like really like dig. Because like so many people with the instant gratification is they hear a message. It's like I had so many people saying, if he wanted to, he would text you back immediately. It's not that I don't want to. It's not that I don't want to be present in your life. It's that I have a life. I have so much more. And it's not that that person is not important. It's that at the time, I need to be with this person.
Right. And that's a boundary I even have to have with, my sewing business. There are times when I don't contact my friends for 2 or 3 days because I've got to get an order out. And, I'll get a text and say, man, I haven't heard from you for 3 days,
Yeah.
And, I used to get a little annoyed by that, but then I thought, no, I just need to remind them that I have obligations. And, most all my friends understand that. I have a few that don't react as well, and I just don't worry about it. Because I do have these obligations and I got to do them. And it's hard. It's hard for me to say no to your kids sometimes, when one of the girls will call me up and say, you're going to dinner. I can't. I got a deadline tonight, Now, there's boundaries in that. There's boundaries in your life where I can say yes so many times, but when you have responsibility, you got to say no.
Yep.
So anyway.
Well, let's move on to the law of activity.
Activity. That's the one I like. Not proactivity. I like activity.
Why do you like that one?
Because I like to get things done. I like to complete things. I like to achieve things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we initiate and we're responders to what we see,
Yeah. And I love this statement. Many times we have boundary problems because we lack initiative. Yeah. I love that word.
We don't want to take it.
No. We're lazy.
Yeah.
We're lazy. We are lazy people.
Naturally.
Naturally.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem with discipline, right? Is like you don't want to discipline yourself because it's not attractive to be disciplined. It's not like, You know how bad I want to sit out on the couch and just eat potato chips and watch Netflix all night? Absolutely.
right.
I would love to do that, do it all day. One perspective I always have is like, could you imagine being a dog? Like everything in your life is taken care of.
Yeah.
Like you're domesticated,
Yeah.
your family actually loves you. You rarely ever do anything wrong. You just get to lay there while you're constantly getting attention because you're constantly being petted. There's constant action within a dog's life that validates them that, oh, I'm loved. I'm in this perfect place. And they don't ever have to work. They don't ever have to do anything. They can go piss and poop on the floor. And I know that my owner's going to clean it up. And the list goes on. They don't have to be responsible.
Right.
But do you want to live that type of life?
No.
Be a sloth?
But how many people do you hear? I mean, how many in your friend circle, and I've got them in mine too, that you hear every day.
Mm-hmm.
I wish this, or I want that, or and you're going, what are you doing to get there?
Yeah.
What are you doing to get that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you being proactive in this?
Right.
I mean, this is one thing we talk about, and I'm going to brag here a little bit. Although I had some bad behavioral things, anger and stuff like that, the one good thing I had was I never allowed my kids to be bored. I mean, well, they were allowed to be bored because they need to, but I mean, they didn't come to me and say, I'm bored, Mom.
Right.
Because why?
Do you think that we learned how to play by ourselves?
Yes, I do.
And don't you think that that would be a way that, because you developed that in us at a young age, that gave you space?
Yeah.
So that you knew that monster, per se or whatever.
Right.
Like, hey, go off, play with the Legos.
Yeah. Go outside, play in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I gave you creative ways to do things too.
Right.
I didn't have a problem.
So important.
Yes. I mean, I didn't have a problem when you kids went out and made a mud hole out in the backyard and got mud from head to toe.
But if it was in your flower garden, you would have been ticked.
Right, but I didn't have no flower gardens back when you were little, But what I'm saying is that activity is productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can engage and you can do, and it's like, I know you kids hated me that Saturday morning was house cleaning day and nobody got to do anything fun until the house was clean, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it taught you guys discipline.
Right.
It did. It taught you guys discipline. Every one of you kids, every one of you have worked ever since you were out of high school, outside of Brock.
Yeah, I mean, that's a different.
Yeah. I mean, when you had a job, you had a job. But,
I mean, but that's to be expected. You have 7 kids. Come on now. There's people that have 2 kids and neither one of them, you know what? I'm not going to say I don't care, but this is something that I want to say, and regardless of people's feelings, that was my grandparents, Yeah. My uncle and my dad, you got 2 kids and they can't even do that. Think about how successful you are to be able to do that with 6 of 7 kids.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole different world. And it's not that, you're better than grandpa and grandma or whatever, but it's true.
It's true. And not to give all myself credit, because it was really God's grace and God's covering in my life and stuff. But, I developed even in my struggles, there was a sense of responsibility in me to get you kids to adult life and be productive, and all of you had jobs. All of you, I never bought any of you a car. You all took care of yourselves, and today you're all taking care of yourselves. I mean, even now that Brock finally got his life together, he's doing well. So he had it in him, but he had to make that decision.
Right.
I knew that. I knew that once you kids were at a certain age, it was really up to you. I had done what I could do, and you were going to take it for what it was. I've talked to you kids before. Do you feel like you lacked anything from your childhood as far as material things?
No.
But at the time when you were kids, you would say, well, my friends got Nikes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I didn't have the Nikes or whatever. But you know what? I had a pair of shoes on my feet.
Right. But you grew up and realized that you really weren't neglected. You didn't not have things.
Right.
You know, you still had somewhat of a stable home. I'm not saying it wasn't chaotic, and I'm not saying that there was some craziness going on there and stuff. But bottom line, I feel like the majority of all you kids have come out of our those years on a good footing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now, do y'all have it together? No, y'all still got your own personal struggles.
Mm-hmm.
There is never going to be a perfect life.
Right.
There's never going to be those, people that never have hiccups.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have hiccups and you don't have struggles and stuff. You never grow.
Right.
Just bottom line, you don't grow. So, but yet, for me, it took me a long time to take some pride into the fact that my kids did get there.
Well, you were proactive in providing structure.
Yes.
And that's key to potential success in the future, is because through structure provides discipline, then discipline is action, right? You're taking action in the things that you don't necessarily want to do. But I think, too, you brought up something key there, which was creativity.
Yeah.
You made us be creative in what was going to entertain us, right? And so you apply that into a professional lifestyle, right? Even podcasting or law enforcement, from my position,
Right.
is like, how am I going to make it better? What do I need to do? How am I going to do
Right.
that? And so then I'm like, how can I look at some other people that have done other great things? And so I imitate a little bit,
Yeah.
and then I initiate and I respond to it by developing my own way to do it and developing creativity in the way
And
that
I think a lot of
it's
that came from,
resulted
if we stopped and think about, I cleaned a building. I was good at cleaning, so we cleaned a building. But you kids see me sew. You guys see me bake and sell baked goods. You see me, finding other ways to even bring income into the house in a creative way. Every one of you kids have got a innate thing being raised to look outside of the 8 to 5 job,
right.
and be creative in other areas.
And that's the other thing. Like, people ask me, how do you, when I talk about some of the things I've seen on the job and some of the things I've experienced and some of the natural emotions of working in law enforcement, and people are like, how do you do that? And I'm like, because there's so much more to life than that.
Right. And you got to compartmentalize.
Mm-hmm.
You do. You have to put it in a compartment that doesn't affect.
Right.
It does, in a sense, still affect you. But if you do it in a healthy way, you don't have to.
Well, you choose.
Yeah,
you
you
choose. I think about it like this. Though. I worked 2 extremely hard calls last December,
Yeah, we talked about them.
and they were back to back, 2 to 3 weeks difference in time. And it involved, gun. So one time I hear the gunshot, I do my thing. We take care of the guy and all this and that. And I guess the initial reaction of that probably wasn't that harsh for me. I didn't see it happen. I just was in the area when it happened, and I saw the result of it, So that to me wasn't that bad. It put me on edge. The following calls, the next few shifts were like, ugh, gosh, I don't want to deal with this. And I was hyper aware to everything, right? And then 2-3 weeks pass by, and I hear another gunshot while I'm at the door of this house. And a guy took his own life. And when I walked into the room, there's his wife calling him. Matrix is playing on the TV. And, initially I'm like, ugh, I definitely don't want to deal with this one, and that changed me. Because as his wife is calling him on the phone, I know that she's going to have to be notified of what just happened. And I look back at that and I say, I never want my mom to find me like that. And I was in a really dark place at that time. So you can take you can take those extremely hard moments and look at them so positive, because now it implements into my life, and it's not a selfish thing here. Like a lot of people probably hear that and see me getting emotional, and then I say that, and it's not a selfish thing. Like there was just so much compassion for her, his wife, kids.
Made you think about that for your own life.
Exactly.
You know?
And so you can walk away from a situation like that and say, I'm not going to be that. And I started implementing things into my life that I wanted to change so that I no longer felt that way anymore.
You know, I feel that way, you know, with anyone who suffers depression. I'm not saying that there's not a chemical imbalance that creates that sometimes. And a situation in our family even, you know, that there's depression. And my stance has always been, depression is never going to change until you want it to change. Because taking a medication and still sitting in the same chair and not doing anything with your life does not change it.
Right.
You have to be proactive. And I say this in context of, I have dealt with fibromyalgia now for 27 years. And I often hear, I don't know how you do it. How do you work at the time, full-time job? Still had 5 kids still at home and stuff. And I said, you know, I learned that the pain is there, whether I'm sitting in the chair, moaning in my pain, or if I'm up and working in the yard or doing something in the house or being creative, something that takes my mind away from that pain. And I found that I like me better if I'm moving and ignoring it than it is when I'm sitting and wallowing in it. And I think it really is a matter of mind over matter. Taking your thoughts captive, even in depression, taking those thoughts captive, giving them to God and saying, you know, this isn't where I want to be stuck at. And I'm going to move. I don't care how bad it hurts. I'm going to move. You know, whether that's emotional pain, physical pain, I'm going to move.
Yeah.
You know, because if you don't move, you're stuck.
Take action.
Yeah. And so boundaries, that's what boundaries is about. Having a productive life and seeing fruit from that production.
Yeah.
You know?
Talking about that, I knew today we were going to record this podcast, and of course I had all day off, and in my boredom, sometimes I do drink, and I'm sitting there like, man, you know, I have a whole bottle of bourbon in there, great, good bourbon. And
maybe that would take care of our cough.
Yeah. I think I moved on from the coffee now. It feels great. I tell you what. But I'm like, I could pour myself a drink right now and I could enjoy it, you know, and just sip on it. But the problem is I don't know if I'm going to want 2, then 3, then 4. Yeah. And then I'm not able to have the conversation with you tonight and know that this is being recorded on Wednesday, the 30th, and it's going to be released in 2 days. So I got all this work to do afterwards. Like, I have to take ownership and act like not make that decision to go do that. And the point me saying that too is that's just today making that one decision. Yeah. It has been 12 months of making that decision for this platform to get to where it's at. Like, people think that, oh, Levi just got lucky and Levi just happened to get there, or they look at it and they're like, I want to be there too. It's been an everyday thing. Grind. Yeah. I'm grinding every day.
And that's the way I felt like even as being a single mom. It was an everyday grind. There was not a luxury to go, I quit.
Right. Right.
You know, because there was too much on the line for me personally. But when I hear people say, I don't know how you do it. I make a choice every day to do it.
Right.
Every day. Now, I'm not saying I'll have days I go, well, I did have one Saturday with this cold and wasn't feeling good. I just didn't get dressed. That was a veg day. I literally got nothing accomplished.
I have those days too.
I don't have them often, but I do take them occasionally.
I mean, 2 weeks ago, I slept for 16 hours in one day.
Yeah.
You just, you need that.
Yes. And it happens. But on a day-to-day basis, like, keeping your house clean. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you have to keep it clean like I keep it clean, but keeping it tidy and livable. Okay. Yeah. Hey, I've been in some houses that I'm like, I question if anybody ought to be living there, but
me too.
But I'm just saying, you make a conscious choice every day to make a decision to do something different, even if it's just one little thing. And I've always said this to everybody: take every little victory, no matter how small it is.
Yeah.
Take every victory, grab a hold of it, hang on to it, and it might be what hangs you over to the next day to do something better,
right?
To do something more, to continue moving.
Yeah. Because if you're stagnant and not moving, you're not becoming better.
But you can't be, like you said in your podcast, you can't wake up one day and go, okay, by golly, I'm going to start a podcast and think all of a sudden it's going to be there.
Right.
It takes, like even my sewing. How many years have I been sewing?
Yeah.
Most of my life. Yeah. I started sewing when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
And I always had a dream to do this, make some money on it and stuff. Never had the opportunity, always in there. And I kept pushing at it and would do it a little bit. And the last 3 years, it has supplemented my income to the point that I got to retire and work only part-time.
Yeah. And another issue, the result of this too, in the platform and everything, is the constant question, how do I do that? I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. I didn't have anybody mentoring me to do it.
Oh,
there's this wonderful thing called YouTube Academy.
Yeah.
And everything, I didn't know how to hook up the computer. I didn't know what mics to buy. I didn't know what soundboard to get. I didn't know how to do editing. I didn't know how to produce. And last year, the most listened to episode was the very first episode that I recorded in August of 21. That tells me everybody that goes to the platform currently are going to episode number 1, and they don't even understand how much I have learned, how much I have evolved, and how much better of an effective communicator that I am. And people don't give the grace. They're like, they listen to that one and they're like, okay, I'm done. That dude's annoying. But if they just heard the depth of conversation that we have. People ask me, what are you doing to change the way things are? Like going back to kind of like taking action in your community and everything.
Yeah.
Like I look at where my perspective is that I'm providing my mind, and I provided the finances to develop this platform and all of the equipment to give people the best quality so that they can at least enjoy the listen, to potentially evolve the mind to go out and do that. It's not that I want it and that I don't want to, but maybe by changing the mind is impacting the culture to get us where we want to be. That's me and my place. And so I found meaning and I found purpose getting past all of the bull crap. All right, let's talk about law number 10. As if we talked about law number 9, 8, and 7 for like 30, 45 minutes. We could have made a whole episode on each law, which is great. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I like getting
It's so hard to condense them down in just a little short blip.
Right. And I think about it too. And I know people tune in and they listen and they're like, where does Levi have any, validity to what he's saying? He doesn't have a psychology degree. He doesn't have a sociology
neither do
degree.
I.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not presenting myself as a psychologist.
Right.
I'm providing personal experience to potentially move somebody beyond. Because here's the other thing. A title oftentimes can potentially put up a barrier to viewing somebody as just a normal person, just like you.
Well, and I think, too, personal experience, sharing personal experience one-on-one with your friend or somebody that comes and asks you, to me, carries a lot more weight than if they just sit in an office and a counselor told them that. Because they have to make it relational, and I really have learned more from people who have already walked that path and came out a victor,
right,
than I did in just hearing someone tell me what I should do.
Yeah.
If they hadn't walked that path. And I think that's very scriptural too, because scripture says that what we have been given, we should give to others. And that means even our pain and our trials and our things, because it shows the humanity in that we all walk a path and we all deal
The
with
essence
things.
of exposure is exposing
Yes.
those things.
And I liked what the chapter said in there is that you don't realize that by exposing, by opening yourself up, allowing the light within you to come out. Where when we keep everything all bottled up and we don't talk about our anxieties or we don't talk about our fears or we don't talk about our shortcomings and stuff like that, Satan uses that up. We keep that inside of us and he grows it and he nurtures it and it becomes a controlling person within you.
Yeah.
You know, and I've always said this. There's no skeletons in my closet.
Right.
I've let them all out because I don't want anything back there that I have to constantly keep in the back of my mind that I can't talk about that, I can't share that, I can't expose that because, oh my gosh, I don't want people to think la 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 of me. You know, and I'm one of those that I just, well, somebody said something to me one time. It says, Kim, there's just not a whole lot sacred to you, is there? And I go, no, not pretty much. I mean, if you want to know, ask me, and I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know,
People have been watching this for 2 hours potentially, and they see my shirt and it says "Dead to Flesh." What does that mean? Well, that means that I have given up all of those things that I hold on to. You know, it's not that there's some things that let's say in a personal relationship, you know, if I was in a relationship right now, I absolutely, you know, there's things in that relationship that I want to talk about. There's things in our relationship. There's the complexity of life.
and it
right?
still keeps coming up, even though, you know, like I say, even though that I feel that I have been delivered from anger.
Right.
Anger still comes up.
Right.
You know, we still battle those things as long as we're in our earthly sinful flesh. We're going to still battle,
Right.
but it's a constant evaluating. It's a constant taking responsibility. It's a constant looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes you have to make an adjustment. Sometimes you got to shift it a little bit, you know, and I think it's a constant everyday thing, but it's making a conscious decision to stay on top of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like all of boundaries. It's like this whole time since episode number 1 of this series has always been about personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility. Because you draw the line in the sand. You say what's too much and what's not enough.
Right.
You look at other people and
What's
you go into
acceptable, what's not.
relationships. You're constantly in this. What am I responsible for, and what are they responsible
Right.
for, and how am I going to react?
Right.
And it's
Now, the 10 laws is not the end of the book.
yeah,
The book does go in and breaks it down a little bit more on different situations and family dynamics and work dynamics and stuff like that. And if you really feel like you're struggling with boundaries, I would suggest you get the book.
yeah. It's Boundaries by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend, and I didn't read the whole book. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I mean, I have 2 or 3 series that I'm running right now.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm very, very busy.
That's all right. Mom made notes.
But you made notes, you know, you coming over and continuing to trudge through some of them. I know, like, I remember episode 2 and 3, there was a lot of unsure stuff and there was a lot of editing with it to make it come out right. This one's going to be a lot of editing because of hacking and coughing.
Oh, yeah.
But I walk away from every single one of them and I'm like, that was the best one yet. That was the best one yet.
Right.
But there's always this feeling of inadequacy. There's all those things. You got to battle through them, you know, and
Right.
you do that. But you want to take true ownership and control of your life. It starts with you taking personal responsibility and establishing the boundaries that will allow you a healthy life in the future.
That's right.
All right, guys. So those are the 10 laws. Like I said, if you missed the first 5, go back and listen to the episode on the first 5 laws, which was our last episode of Boundaries. I think it was episode number 63. Go back and listen to that. and that will give you the conclusion of all 10 laws of boundaries. But with this being the last episode, and I know we're running at almost at least an hour and a half of podcast right now, but you've been a guest on, I want to say probably approximately 12 of the episodes. In this one, you're co-host, you're hosting it with me. What has kind of been something that you've learned from it? Have you learned anything? If not, it's okay. I'm just curious.
You mean just learning being on the podcast?
Yeah, and do you...
Well, I have, what I really enjoyed this is because I've always had a desire to share my experiences.
Yeah.
I've always had a desire, and when I say that, because I struggled for a long time in sharing some of my experiences and stuff, just simply because I didn't want it to sound like I'm bragging or boastful or that I achieved a great thing or anything like that. But I believe that God brought us through the wilderness as a family. And God has showed up so many times when I didn't deserve for him to show up, but I feel like that he gave me these experiences. And you and I've talked about this. There's very few experiences in life that we haven't dealt with as a family in one way or another. I mean, I can give you a list of every one of you kids going through certain things and my going through certain things and some traumatic things. But I always felt like God wanted me to share those experiences to help lift other people up, help to encourage other people that especially single moms. It can be done and it can be successful. When you're in the muck of it, it looks like, oh my gosh, but there is success, And so I've enjoyed this because oftentimes they say, Lord, how am I going to do that? I don't have a psychology degree. I have an experience degree, and I look at like I'll do Sunday school classes sometimes and do like in a support group type kind of thing and stuff. But so this was very feeding to me to get to use something that really was pivotal and changing my life, because boundaries was a great thing that changed things for me. And so that has been fulfilling for me to get to share my experiences in the sense of what this whole boundaries thing had done in my life.
And people ask me, what is the podcast about? It's about sharing that story.
Yeah.
Because in a culture where the degree matters, the position matters, the title matters, you miss the story.
Yeah.
You miss the authenticity and the realness of people in their lives.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. It's been fun. I don't know if maybe in the future we'll potentially do like
I think it'd be fun to do
I
think it'd be fun to do a panel with your family.
Oh, I would love that. Getting them to do that, that's another thing.
We have a few that are a little more on the reserve side where some of us don't care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it would be really cool if all of them could get to a point that they'd all share their own experiences, kind of thing.
And one thing that I'll say here too is I've shared a lot of personal experiences throughout nearly 70 episodes, and I've never had one person diminish my character because I shared that story. No,
it helps lift people up. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that's going to go, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
But bottom line is that if people really look at other people's stories, especially the successful stories, and I'm not saying successful in getting rich or possession and stuff, but I mean people that have come through a wilderness, and I feel that way with us, coming through a wilderness and coming out somewhat whole and somewhat on a positive note.
Yeah.
And productive and caring and loving people, that story needs to be shared because it's doable. And you can achieve that yourself for your own family.
Yeah. And that's been the whole kind of point, and one of the reasons why I think I always find myself on just about every podcast talking about, this whole self-love movement thing, and that Bible verse of love others as you love yourself, and that self-love is implied. You naturally take care of yourself. You clean your house. You show up to work.
Right.
Not to diminish the people that have given up responsibilities within their life that are ready for it to end.
I don't even call that self-love when you do your house. That's self-respect.
Yeah, but it's the essence of taking care of yourself.
Yes.
And so like that's as basic as self-love is. It goes no further beyond that. That's it. A person that's not cleaning, or a person that's not showing up to work, or showing up in aspects of their life, all of those things, that is somebody that's given up on life at that point.
Yeah.
The general essence of life is doing those things. So love others how I want to be loved.
Right.
I don't take that as go love myself, love myself, love myself. Everybody skips over the first part, and that's loving others. You're commanded to love others.
Right.
But you're assumed to love yourself in that verse. And
Right.
so many people miss that.
Right.
But you want to find joy and you want to find happiness in your life.
That's right.
You need to learn to love other people, because I'll
Right.
tell you this right now, this whole message, everything,
Yeah.
the most moving part of it is me being told, yo, that changed me today. That changed my perspective. I loved that you shared that. Like, that right there is me absent of ego and the image to everybody. But it's me like loving them enough
Right.
to be completely open book, that I am approachable and you can talk to me about your issues, and I can be a friend that is similar to a therapist or whatever, because I love people and I want what's best for people. It's not about loving me and protecting me and all about me.
Right.
It's about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is very fulfilling when I can share. There's been many times, doing the single moms ministry, and showing up. And I got to tell you this one. When the girl came in one night for our meeting, and we always went around the room and just kind of did an overview of our week and if we had any prayer requests and stuff. And I started, and I told them I'd had a crappy week. I mean, it was just a crappy week and stuff. And it went all the way around the room. And this one woman, the last woman, she looks at me straight in the eye and she says, God, I'm so glad that you said you had a crappy week. She says, because I thought if I come in here and everybody had a good week, it was going to be really tough. And I said, so that's the part of being real. Don't always flower things.
Yeah.
Just be real.
Yeah.
I
see somebody walk in a room and they're all positive and hee all the time. I'm like, I do not want to be around that person. That person's fake. That is so disingenuous.
Yeah.
We need positive people. We need positivity. We need joy. We need happiness.
Right. But we need it in the midst of misery.
Yeah. There's a balance there, a balance.
Right. So it's been good. I have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed having you on, and it's definitely feels like, especially over the last 25 episodes, was like getting up over this hill, and now it's just like everything's downhill. It's just like so easy to keep going and keep digging and keep having conversations and setting up the next episode. It's not this like grind anymore. It's not hard. It's just, man, I love it, and it's become, I'm in a season right now where it's become very easy and natural for me. And I think the result of that is more authentic conversation that is changing people's lives. And I'm excited to see where it goes from here. And my hope is that in the future, somebody comes back to this series, because I think there's so much applicable things that have been discussed throughout all of these episodes. But with that being said, is there anything else you want to say?
Nope, but thanks.
All right. Well, obviously there is nothing left unsaid after 2 hours of podcasting.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of things we can say. We could go on and on and on and on for days. And
well, I think just in general, we're talkers.
Yeah. Well, there's that. There's the boundary right there. Okay, we're at like 2 hours of recording, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. First of all, I know there's some edits in here. Not everything's perfectly curated. We've been hacking, we've been coughing, we've been trudging through the storm of sickness. But it is what it is. Welcome to having like some normalcy and not being COVID-19. Now it's just a common cold. Weird. Nobody's like, when I was sick or still am sick, nobody's asked me, oh my God, do you have COVID? No. They're like, oh, it's just a common cold going around. And you know how good it feels to finally have that again. Yeah. Like it feels good.
Everybody's got it.
Yeah, everybody's got it. Everybody that I talk to's got it. Yeah. So you guys, one last time, make sure that you follow us on Spotify so you're notified when new episodes come out, where conversations like these are provided with multiple different people and their stories and all different things like that. If you enjoyed this long form podcast, message me. Tell me or my mother what you appreciated about this conversation, because we do this for you. We don't do it to seek validation in that, but it is very relieving and joyful to see how my story or mom's story impacted you. Make sure that you leave a Apple Podcast review and rating, as that will push out the content more so that people will hear these real and authentic conversations. Subscribe on YouTube, and make sure that you guys share this out to your friends and family, because I think that there's a lot of things that are applicable to the listeners' lives, to our lives, and how we can move beyond some of the pain and suffering that we experience, where we're no longer bitter and resentful, but that we find true joy and happiness through establishing boundaries in our lives. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Yep. All right. God bless everybody.